Hello, my name is Stephen Lim. I'm an arbitrator and barrister with 39 Essex Chambers. And I'm here today with my colleague.
Hi, I'm Karishma Vora. I'm a counsel and barrister at 39 Essex Chambers in London. And we're here today with Ila Kapoor and Raj Panchmatia. Ila Kapoor is a partner at Shardul Amarchand Mangaldas in Delhi and specializes in domestic and international arbitration. And I'm very pleased to say she leads one of India's only women-only team, I think a 6-member women team. So Ila, we're very happy to have you here today.
And Raj,
thank you, Karishma.
And Raj is a partner with a leading firm in India, Khaitan & Co. He's also a commercial disputes lawyer. He works in both litigation and arbitration, both domestically and internationally, and runs a large team with good gender diversity. We're going to talk today about the use of technology and how technology has transformed the way we work. I mean, part of this has been foisted upon us by the circumstances that we're faced with the pandemic this year. But probably, it's produced both positive and maybe some negative results, and that's one of the things that we're going to explore in this episode of At Home Around the World. We're going to begin with talking about how technology has brought efficiency in the way we work. It's not perhaps just a make-do while the pandemic still prevents us from meeting in person or physically, but it could potentially change the way we work even post-pandemic because of the efficiencies that we see that technology brings. One of the examples, possibly, or perhaps one of the most prevalent examples, is the use of video technology, just as we're using it now. So let's delve into this first topic, and we'll begin with Raj. Raj, what's your experience with using video conferencing, particularly web video conferencing, for the work that you do in hearings or other aspects of the work that you do?
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Karishma, for having us here. It's a pleasure to be with Ila on the same webinar together. I'll tell you, technology, I think, has been a great enabler during this period. All of us were a little circumspect as to when we started, how the courts and arbitrations are going to go ahead. How is the litigation practice, the arbitration practice going to go anywhere? All of us were in a lockdown state. We didn't know what the future held. We were all worried. But I think platforms like Zoom, Microsoft Teams, WebEx, we started to adapt, started to learn. And I think while these were always available, none of us used it as much as we did now. And I think that's been a great sign of using this. We all knew that these platforms existed. None of us used it. We always thought that physical meeting was much better than the virtual meeting. But when we were stopped from doing a physical meeting, I think this was the best available option. And I think every jurisdiction has adopted to it, including India, the courts, the arbitrators, the councils, and everyone has adopted quite well to it. Of course, there are challenges, and that's going to be there for some time till the time infrastructure is developed. But I think, by and large, it's been a great multiplier in the sense we've been able to hold hearings even during the lockdown periods. Courts have functioned well. Arbitrations have functioned extremely well. In fact, I would say the arbitrators have adapted quite well to this entire technology and platform. One other good thing that I've seen is we've all been far more prepared for our hearings because of virtual hearing, because we know we don't have that luxury of an assistant next to us or helping us or guiding us. To that extent, I think each one of us have started to prepare far more in detail. It's not only for us, but also for counsels who appear in the matter. I think each one of them have started to work much harder on their briefs during this pandemic. They've started to also use multiple screens to learn the rope. we've also started to do cross-examinations through virtual hearings. Whether that's the best thing or not is a question, but still, in a smaller matters, reasonably decent matters, you continue virtual cross-examination by virtual hearings. I think that's a very plus. Arbitration litigation has taken a bit longer to adapt, but arbitrations have been much quicker in adapting. Initially, nobody wanted to go ahead with virtual hearing. Now everybody is keen, at least on arbitration side, that let's go ahead with virtual hearing. Courts are still taking some time to adapt, but I think they've realized that this is there for a long time, and at least procedural hearings, the smaller hearings, the final hearings are taking place through virtual hearing. The only downside that I see is there is a frequent connection sometimes because of the infrastructure, not availability. And infrastructure is not available equally in every state. There may be enough infrastructure in certain metro cities, but what about the tier 2, tier 3 cities and other courts, district courts, where the infrastructure is not as much available?
Thank you, Raj. I want to stay with one of the points that you brought up, which was how you think this has had some positives in terms of the way people work. That you mentioned that now the lead counsel are more prepared, that it has brought some efficiencies. Do you see a role for this virtual technology to stay even after the effects of the pandemic are over? The case for it, and probably internationally, is stronger. People don't have to travel across borders that much. But what about within India as well, the way you practice? India is a very large country. Do you see even a possibility for virtual hearings staying even after the pandemic is over, so that people don't have to travel within India that much? What are your thoughts on that?
I think, especially for arbitrations, virtual hearings are here to stay. And even post-pandemics, we will see arbitrations, more and more arbitrations being conducted virtually. So the traveling across cities is minimized. Courts, we will have to wait and watch how they adapt, because some courts are very comfortable with virtual hearings, some courts are not as comfortable. But of course, there is a case for certain types of matters in courts to be shifted to virtual hearing, especially the procedural hearings and things like that.
Thank you, Raj, for that view from Mumbai. Now let's turn to Delhi. Let's see how it looks from Delhi. What are your thoughts on the use of video technology, Ila?
Well, I agree with a lot of what Raj said. I think it's here to stay. The virtual hearing, the video hearing. There's two aspects to it. Hopefully, the pandemic is not here to stay, and we'll have our other lawyers around to assist us sooner than later, even if we are still doing it by video. I think that what has happened in the last 6-7 months has been essentially a shift in mindset. As Raj said, a lot of this technology was already there. We had Zoom, we had some of these forums, but people were reluctant to use it. And especially in domestic seated arbitrations, arbitrators were reluctant to use it. You know, they're of a certain age, they're just not used to some types of technology. And what's happened is they've really been pushed to accept it and to realize it's very doable. In fact, very often it's preferable in terms of the time and the cost that it's saving. So hopefully what's going to happen is once this is over and, you know, we'll continue with this and we will have arbitrators saying, well, you know, you don't really need to come down to Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore. Let's just have a hearing on Zoom or WebEx, etc. So definite shift, mindset shift, more than technology shift, I think is what's going to take us on the other side of this.
That's great. It's great to see the positives out of this and the continuing use of this post the pandemic. What about the question of handling documents? Do you think that with this new platform that we could also make a related move to moving to just using electronic documents, or do you still think that we should still have hard copy documents in some way? What do you think, Ila?
Well, Raj and we disagree on this. I unfortunately haven't adapted very well to e-documents, and I still have a daily bundle of volumes of documents sent to my apartment to prepare for the next day's cases. And I know this is very, not eco-friendly, etc. And I wish to get more eco-savvy and get those e-documents. So that's where I want to go, but I'm certainly not there yet. I think Raj is already got his 6 screens up and knows which document is where, so he's different.
Well, Raj, you've been put on the spot now. You've been listed as the example of someone who's gone completely electronic. Can you tell us how you manage electronic documents?
So I'll tell you, when it started, I was finding it difficult. But fortunately for us as a firm, we had started to digitize all our documents way in advance, at least a year back. And that gave us an opportunity to use digitized documents much easier and much faster way. While I'm not as tech savvy as Ila puts it, but I try to now work more on the screen and rather than hard copies. I have tried to manage documents through soft copies. But yes, I still need to manage on maybe some kind of a software which can help us with document management. And that's something that we need to all adapt to. But yes, we've done recently some very big arbitrations where huge volumes of documents were the entire team was working on soft copies, including counsels and even the arbitrators. So that was something that we saw was a positive. And arbitrators were pretty old. They were maybe 75, 80-year-old arbitrators, but they were still managing to do everything electronically. And that was a very positive sign generally. And I thought that was they were willing to try it out. And that was very good.
Do you use any particular
I just think
software? Well, I'll just ask this question, Raj. We'll come back to your comment, Ila. I mean, do you use any particular software for this, Raj, or any particular devices like iPads, computers? What do you think is the best mix to go completely paperless?
So I do keep an iPad and my laptop both together during the hearings. It helps me look at the documents on my iPad quicker. But I still feel that maybe one more screen or something would make things better, because sometimes there are multiple documents and I find it difficult to use all of them on an iPad. But yes, there are people who are able to manage it very well. And I know people in my office who can use iPad like very easily, like a book. And they are doing multiple documents at the same time and they are able to manage it. I think that's something that we need to learn and adapt to. We're not used to this kind of world, but yeah, we have to get there.
Ila, you had some thoughts on this, having heard
what Raj said. I was just going to add that I completely agree with Raj, and my entire team is like, they're very savvy with these e-documents. It's just me. But I do feel like, for example, in a cross-examination, which now we've all been doing so much of on video, it is actually, I find it quicker for the proceeding, for the witness and the counsel and the arbitrator to have hard copies around them, rather than to keep pulling down your share screen to show the e-document. Now, we found that takes longer than everybody just referring to an index number. So that has been my experience in cross-examination, that the hard copy is still quicker.
Which to some extent, Ila, I think I agree with you that we're not quite there yet in terms of going completely paperless, although I do tend to work with electronic documents a fair bit, but I also tend to agree with you that particularly during the hearing, having the hard copy bundles really helps in terms of efficiency and managing documents better. I think, Karishma, you wanted to comment on this.
No, yes, I agree with Ila. So I've had 2 types of electronic bundles during hearings, and I've found that the ones where all of the pages are just in one PDF, even though the PDF may be thousands of pages, has worked more efficiently than having each document as a separate tab, which depends, and everybody has differing internet speeds, and it just takes it makes it tedious, especially during cross-examination. And one other point that I wanted to just ask is what occurs when a witness has intermittent connection, and do arbitrators or judges allow a witness to drop off, log off, and then re-log back on? Because I've been in a situation where the judge said, no, absolutely not. Even if it's an intermittent connection, we'll just have to deal with it. But we cannot have the witness drop off. Because we can't have a witness in the middle of their cross-examination being in a position to be able to take calls from their other parties on their side. So have you had any such experience?
If I were to say that we've conducted even cross-through video conferencing during the pandemic, and what we did was we had one of and the witness was in a different city, so we did have somebody local sitting next to the witness in the same room, and if the connection dropped off, there was somebody there, so it was not something to worry about that the connections dropped and witness is going to do anything else. So that was one. But there are ways and means to look at it and how to deal with it, because now there are so many protocols that are there, virtual hearing protocols, and maybe that also covers on situations like these. So maybe that can be considered.
Karishma, I haven't had a internet drop off with the witness. What's happened, I have had a recent case where the witness keeps asking to use the facilities at a particular point of it, cross-examination. And it's very difficult for anyone really after a point to say, well, you can't go. And we don't have someone sitting in this remote location with the witness. So when he goes, there's really not much you can do if he's calling up his counsel or co-witness, etc. So there is certainly this issue with video cross-examination.
Just before we move on to another topic, I think one final question that I want to throw open to everyone would be the length of video hearing. Some people have said you can't be engaged in a video hearing for as long as you would physical. What's your experience been with this? Why don't we begin with Ila, and then we'll hear what Raj and maybe Karishma has to say.
So I definitely agree. It has to be shorter than a physical hearing. We have done virtual hearings which go on for 5-6 hours, and it's exhausting. I'm not sure how engaged everybody is at the end of it. But this happened more at the beginning, 7 months ago, when we were getting accustomed to what these hearings would be like. So we just kept the hours that we had for a physical hearing and we moved them into virtual. I think people are really coming to an understanding that after 2 hours or 2.5 hours, you need a break in any kind of, either it's final arguments or cross-examination. So I would say the sweet spot is between 2 and 3 to stop it there on a virtual.
Raj?
I quite agree with Ila. We've had long hours of arbitration on virtually, and it gives you a fatigue, it gives you a screen fatigue. I'm not sure that anyone is able to concentrate that long. As counsels and as lawyers, we do get exhausted. And therefore, it's better to have shorter hearings if you can, maybe have a number of more days, but do a shorter hearings. One other thing that probably I found it very useful was that as an arbitrator, if you could kind of do a frequent hearings just to check on the parties as to how they are doing during this pandemic, and kind of control the process of arbitration through maybe a quick half an hour procedural video hearing every few months to ensure that the pleadings are coming on time and everything is streamlined. Otherwise, you tend to, in this pandemic, trying to take far more extensions, delay just creeps in. I think some arbitrators who are proactive can actually reduce this and kind of streamline the whole process and control the entire process very effectively.
That's great, Raj. I think that aligns with something that I have been thinking about as well as an arbitrator, that using this video platform gives the tribunal and the parties more opportunity to engage in case management. I think there's a lot of positives to that. Well, Karishma, you're going to have the last word on this, and then you'll also take us into the next topic. As I think we should move on to the next topic we're going to focus on.
Thank you, Stephen. I would agree with everything Raj and Ila have said, in particular that we need frequent breaks. But the one that I found the least tiring was actually a 3-day, freezing injunction, which there was no way that we could have broken it up because there were a number of issues and worldwide assets frozen. But what assisted, and this was at the DIFC, was that it was no video, it was audio only. And that really, it just took the pressure off. It also took the sort of fatigue off. And those 3 days were actually easier than a video hearing, but they were also easier than an in-person court hearing. That I found quite useful. Moving on to the next topic is technology democratizes. And there's been, a fair bit of debate about this in India, around the world as well. And perhaps we can start with the positives. Maybe Ila can jump in. Have you had experience with perhaps advocates from tier 2, tier 3 cities appearing in what are known as the major metro courts? Do you think that there are other benefits, perhaps with your own team being able to, travel, so as to speak, virtually in larger numbers than a client might previously have been willing to spend?
Yeah, Karishma, definitely. What's happened is that costs have reduced. Travel, hotels, all these costs have reduced. So first of all, it's much better for the client. People always think a lot before going into an arbitration, because especially if it's an out-of-station one where people have to travel to another place, which is usually the case for one party, and it's just become more affordable. If this is something that can be sustained, I think it will be beneficial to arbitration as a whole. Now, another thing that's happened is we forget for international arbitration perspective, if there is a hearing in Singapore and perhaps I could have only taken one associate, or maybe we have a co-counsel who didn't want the cost of us coming over, lots of different permutations. Now things have opened up. It's a Zoom hearing, it's a virtual hearing, more people can attend, more people can participate. So there is that sense of democratization. As you said, there is there will be in the Supreme Court, I'm sure that there are counsels from all over India who are now appearing virtually and don't need to travel to Delhi. Raj will probably know more about that than I do. So in the sense of saving of time and cost and people being able to be in places without actually traveling, there has been a democratization. You asked me only for the plus points, so I'm not going to go into what the negative is, but so far, yes, that has been positive. Yeah.
So I think there are quite a few positives. I think as what Ila rightly said, people getting opportunities. I also feel that a lot of youngsters getting exposure to the international arbitration, because you wouldn't have your team members traveling at every international hearing, and there'll be cost constraints. Clients can't take everybody out. But that's kind of given a lot of opportunity to youngsters to be part of an international arbitration and learn how the international arbitration actually function. They get exposed to looking at international arbitrators, QCs on the other side, and learn from there. I think the exposure has been tremendous, not only for the cities in bigger cities, but also for the smaller cities. Like we've had occasions where we have had counsels appearing from different parts of India. Some of the counsels who are extremely good and very competitive, very competent, not seen generally in the bigger cities, but they argue really well and really make some very good points. And they are appearing in high courts, Supreme Courts. And I think it's a great opportunity to everybody. I think that's a fantastic opportunity, I see. The other thing is our juniors, or say our team members, have been able to work from their hometowns. And I think that's again a plus point, because they have been now they are with their families and still working. Here they were staying alone. They were always in office. Now they are at their home with their parents and still working. So that I think is again a benefit, that they are able to spend more time with the family and at the same time do the work. Now, we'll go to the other issue, to whether that actually impacts the work-life balance is a different thing, which of course, I know there is a next question to it. So I won't go down that path right now. But it is also, the other thing that is also done is when you have your team members in different cities, you may sometimes end up getting a matter from that city, which earlier may not have happened. You would have never thought of a matter coming to you from a smaller city. But now even though matters come from those cities, because you have somebody there, he's your ambassador there. And when people see them working so hard and managing everything virtually. I think that also gives a good reputation to the organization and is able to build a brand through it.
Yes, absolutely. I think the clients would find it invaluable to be able to just have someone locally, who they can meet or talk to and who speaks the same language. But moving on to the other or the flip side of this debate, and there has been a fair bit of this in the press, including bar associations speaking for what they call counsels who are or lawyers who are perhaps not as successful and their practice is suffering. I'm not sure what your views are on this, but would you say that technology democratizes overall, or do you think that it only democratizes in relation to a certain segment of counsel and lawyers, leaving others out?
So of course,
Raj?
Of course there is a case, and there is what people are saying is right. It's not that there's a huge section of lawyers who doesn't have that kind of infrastructure. We're talking about larger cities, but there are tier 2 cities, there are tier 3 cities, there are smaller district courts. There are individual lawyers even in villages and gram panchayats. Now, how do we give them the opportunity? As long as they have the infrastructure, they can do it. But if they don't have the infrastructure, then yes, they have suffered. And during the pandemic period, when the courts are completely off, many lawyers we've heard of have had serious financial issues because they've not been able to manage anything. No work has taken place since last so many months. So while technology has been an enabler for some of us who've been fortunate enough to be in larger cities, but it's also had a huge impact on people, a section of lawyers who've not been able to have that benefit. And there is a concern there. Therefore, India needs to first build up its infrastructure, the technology, and maybe provide some kind of facility even to district courts for virtual hearing. But yeah, that will take some time, I think.
Ila, before I ask you to jump in, there was just one point that I wanted to highlight, which is, in fact, the availability of data in abundance in India versus other places. So, for example, my data usage or data allowance is 2 GB per month in the UK, but it's 2 GB per day in India. And if one bears that in mind, and of course, this data is available across board in remote locations, why is it still that that certain segments are left out, or that we complain about data connectivity? Is it data, or is it really power shortages that may be the issue? And you may have other thoughts too on the point.
So Karishma, I think it's also largely a problem about power and not having uniform distribution of power through our country. And even in Delhi, by the way, my power shortage happens quite often. So it's not just tier 2, tier 3. And if I wanted to, in fact, I thought a lot about working away from Delhi in a nicer location for a while, since one is able to do that now. But just the fear of, would I have consistent supply of electricity? I mean, it was a huge deterrent. So I'm sure that is a big factor for people in India, outside of the metropolises and even within. Raj, what do you think?
I think the infrastructure is a challenge, and while things are better overall, but yes, if you are in a remote situation, or sometimes even in Delhi, like what Ila said, you could have situations like you could have a one-off situation where in the middle there was a day in Bombay where the entire Bombay was without electricity because there was a grid collapse. Now, you don't anticipate things like these. But yes, it can happen. Therefore, infrastructure, yes, like the electricity and others, but also the reach of data to many parts of the country. Like you would not get signals in many places. So if you are in certain towns, certain cities, getting a proper signal on internet is also a big question. So overall, we need to improve the infrastructure. We're doing much better in that sense. I think India is the only country which has huge penetration of data as compared to any other country in the world. But we still need to do much better. I think our infrastructure needs to be still better in sense of electricity and virtual hearing capabilities.
Thanks, Raj. And I think, Stephen, this brings me back to you to move on to the next topic, perhaps.
Thank you, Karishma. Well, let's move things down to a more personal level. We've been talking about how technology might influence or change the way we work, but let's touch on something that actually Raj touched on earlier, which is the work-life balance and how this actually impacts us personally, but also in connection to the way we work. Let's hear from Ila. I think Ila's got some strong views about this.
Well, last time we spoke, Stephen, what I told you is one of the things that I felt like this 7 months at working from home has done, has taken the stigma out of the phrase working from home. Now, a lot of working mothers, sort of work around work hours and taking care of their kids by maybe leaving office a little earlier than their male counterparts. They pick up the work at home, after a particular point, but male colleagues would always have that, oh yeah, she's working from home. I just feel like that may be a thing of the past. I hope that's a thing of the past because everybody is doing it now and you can see how effective it is. It's not necessary to be sitting in the office in view of everybody to get work done. So that's a positive thing I feel that's come out of this. The other thing is, of course, in work-life balances, there isn't any, and you have to be careful what you wish for because I'm longing to go back to the office and have my work day divided with work, kids, and just separate responsibilities. This mixing both up through the course of the day is difficult, is very difficult. So.
Raj, what's your experience been with this? I know you've been probably holed up in your apartment in Mumbai for months. How are you adapting to that?
I would definitely love to go back to office. I'm present in my office. I'm missing that terribly. But at the same time, I can see that days have got longer. It just doesn't end. It starts very early and your meetings just keep going on and on until pretty late at night. There's no Saturdays, there's no Sundays. And there are no timings. So now everybody's available all the time virtually. So even if you need anything, just immediately start a video call and you'll have everybody all on the call. So I think that sometimes gets a bit much, not only on you, but also on your team, because then you also expect your teams to be there on the calls when the hearings are there or meetings are there. And so it's not also being fair with your team. So I think it's blurring that. We need to respect at some point in time that, while we are working from home doesn't mean that we are working 24 hours. And we need to respect that there has to be some time which is given to an individual, which is a personal time, and when he's off work. Now, how do we get that? Something that all of us are thinking and trying to see. Yes, there is a blurring of lines between personal time and work time, and the working hours are just getting longer and longer by the day.
Well, one thing that a lot of people are talking about around the world now is, will the world go back to the office after this is over? I think there are going to be some structural changes, particularly in law firms as well. I think law firms are looking now at how much space they need and how they work, and there's some expectation that remote working is shown to work in the legal sector, and the question is how then will law firms restructure to make it efficient that people can remote work sometimes and then work from the office when they need to. What's the view from India? And particularly, I've been to India, so I know what the traffic's like in Mumbai on the best of days, the same in Delhi. Do you think that when you can all go back to your office, there's going to be some changes? Or will everybody just go back to the office and then go back to life the way it was before the pandemic hit us?
So I definitely think that when we all go back to the office, there's going to be some rethinking. People may choose a career path where they do more work from home and certain days in the office, certain days working from home based on their personal considerations. And I think the management would certainly consider these proposals that would come to them if they made sense for them.
Thanks, Ila. Well, what about Mumbai, Raj? How do you think things are going to change in Mumbai?
I think Mumbai also, the firms will consider work from home as an option, and it's a viable option. They will move towards, putting some practices, some people, and allow them to work from home. Not sure whether the practices like the litigation practice will be able to move completely work from home if the courts are still doing physical hearings. But other than that, I think, of course, work from home will be considered very positively by the firms. I don't think anybody's going to look down upon it anymore.
That's great. Well, Karishma, again, I'm going to give you the last word on this, because I think you've had a rather different work from home experience since the pandemic has struck.
Yes, I mean, I think it's been great. Ila and I actually addressed a conference together earlier this year, pre-pandemic, and we spoke about work from home. And it was a shock to the system for me when I had newly moved to London over a decade ago, that working from home was just so natural and normal, and people were not sort of looked upon differently for working from home. And it's great if we can bring that to India. That's the point that I'd made earlier this year as well. And I mean, working from home can be working from anywhere. It's now apparently become a thing. So on that positive note, I should just say thank you very much to Raj, Ila, and Stephen in Singapore. It's been great to have you here today, and I hope those who are watching have picked up a thing or two that they can take forward with them into the next year.
Thank you very much, Raj and
Thank
Ila. Great to...
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Karishma.
Thank you. Thank you for
It's wonderful to be here.